Okay, the Farbrengen they're going to learn is from Purim Tavshin Chav Beis 1962, and I'm going to paraphrase the beginning of the Farbrengen, and then we're going to go into the text. The Rebbe began the Farbrengen with singing the nigun of Avinu Malkeinu. And usually nigun you think of singing on Purim. There's actually one year they sang a nigun, the Yechidus nigun, before the Farbrengen. I think it was 1958. And the Rebbe commented and said, that's a nigun from Tainus Esther. Now let's sing a nigun of Purim. But that's the Rebbe that began the Farbrengen. There were many times, just like in my we just learned in 1953, that the Rebbe was doing things in heaven, arranging things to happen in the world, like in the Maimer that we just learned, and that, as I mentioned, we started the Maimer, that during that Farbrengen, that's when the Tzira Yehudim, one of the Hamans of our times, was destroyed, was killed, Stalin Machshemai. Anyway, so I don't know of events surrounding this Purim, but it's just interesting. Rebbe begins the Farbrengen with Avinu Malkeinu. Purim is a time when things happen, things descend in this world. And that's the theme that begins the Farbrengen with. He says that in the Megillah Esther, it talks about the future of the days of Purim, and how Esther and Mordechai asked everyone to celebrate Purim every year, and the memory of Purim should never leave the Jewish people, never leave their children. So the promise is that in any situation that will ever happen, in any time, in any place, as we've seen in history, that after the first Purim, there were different kinds of situations from one end of the spectrum to the other. There were the best kind of times. There was times when things were openly good for the Jewish people in history, physically and spiritually, as it was when the Beis Hamikdash was built, because the story of Purim happened between the first and second Beis Hamikdash. So the Beis Hamikdash was built after the story of Purim, and there were, Rachmana litzlan, may Hashem preserve us, there were exact opposite kinds of Purim that we've had. So despite all the differences of where we have been, what's happening to us, the context of history where Purim takes place, still the Torah promises us that it won't affect Purim. Both it won't affect the remembrance of Purim, as the Torah says, these days will be remembered, and it also won't affect V'nasim, it won't affect the actual impact of Purim, not just in a memory, but it should actually do something. In order for this promise to be fulfilled completely, we have to act, as it says in this pasuk that this verse is from, their children. The memory of Purim should never leave their children. That means not only parents, but also children also have to have this remembrance of Purim, and not just remembrance, but in a way that it brings to action. This promise is so reaches such a deep place that even after Mashiach comes, when it says that all the holidays will stop, it says all holidays will cease to exist and Mashiach will come, still there's a Purim will continue. Why isn't Mashiach will come that all the holidays will cease? Doesn't mean literally that there won't be any holidays and Mashiach will come. Doesn't mean Mashiach will come, we won't have a Rosh Hashanah and a Yom Kippur and a Sukkot and a Pesach. What it means is, when Mashiach will come and he'll redeem us with the true and complete Geula, there'll be absolute goodness, even better than the time of the first Beis Hamikdash. Better than the best situation when Shlomo HaMelech was the king. Within the period when the temple was standing, that was the best period. It says about Shlomo HaMelech that in his time he was a 15th generation from Avram Avinu, and just like the 15th day of the month, the moon is full. So it says about Shlomo HaMelech, it doesn't mention it here, but it says another place in Chassidus, just like the moon is full on the 15th of the month, so too the 15th generation of Moshe Rabbeinu was a blessed generation that had the best time physically and best time spiritually. The generation of King Solomon, the moon was full, so to speak. So, but that doesn't come close to how good it's going to be in the moment Mashiach will come. And so when Mashiach will come, and things will be so good, so all the other holidays will be nullified. What does it mean they'll be nullified? That the tremendous joy and light and warmth that we receive through the holidays won't be considered important compared to the incredible light and joy and warmth that we'll have because Mashiach has come. So this will continue with us, not just on Shabbos and after Mashiach comes, not just on Yom Tov after Mashiach comes, but every day of the week we'll have this tremendous light and warmth every single day and joy, so that a holiday won't be considered significant, because even a regular Tuesday is significant. A regular Tuesday is full of light and warmth. Well, what's unique, what will be unique when Mashiach will come, will stand out, is the days of Purim and the Megillah Esther. Concerning these two things, the Torah says they will never be nullified. As the Torah promises that the days of Purim will not, their memory will never cease from their children. It means that the days of Purim and the concepts and the lessons we could take from Purim is a lot greater than all other holidays, even greater than what Mashiach gives to a Tuesday is the days of Purim. Purim gives us more than that. And Rebbe commented to highlight this truth, a story that Rebbe Rashab was once arguing with a certain intellectual about prophecy, about angels. Angels are the ones who cause prophecy to happen. The prophecy is given through angels, and about godliness in general. And the guy told Rebbe Rashab, hold on a second. I have a visiting guest from Florida who is outside my room trying to get into this share. Hold on. Okay, so the Rebbe Rashab was arguing with him about godliness and about prophecy, and the guy tells the Rebbe Rashab that doesn't make any sense, and a human mind cannot understand this, and therefore they don't believe in it. And even if they would believe it, it has no relationship to them. Even if we can't understand it, there's no relationship to us. So this intellectual kept Torah, kept mitzvahs. He did everything with faith, but his mind couldn't accept these things of godliness, of prophecy, of angels. And this affected his world outlook. There is a possibility for a person to live that way. As the Torah says, that when Hashem gave us the Torah, we said we will do before we understand. That you accept the Torah even though you don't understand it yet. But what Nasiv Inisham means is that you accept everything completely and as if you understood it fully. But this person said he accepts these things because that's what his father taught him. That's what he got used to. But in his mind, in his understanding, he doesn't accept it. And it's not important to him because so he was the opposite of Nasiv Inisham. Nasiv Inisham means I'll accept it fully even though I don't understand it. That's what Nasiv Inisham means. He says, I got used to this and I subscribe to this, but it has no relevance to me because it just doesn't make sense to me. So this was a discussion between this religious intellectual, and the Rebbe Rashab. And this was at a time when the Rebbe Rashab had traveled from Lubavitch, and he had gone to a health spa resort, and since there were no trains in Lubavitch yet, they traveled by horse and wagon. So the Rebbe Rashab allowed this guy to complete all of his claims and all of his tightness, all of his different things that bothered him, logically. And after he finished, the Rebbe Rashab said to him, you see that we're now traveling to go to this resort. There are three kinds of creatures involved in this journey. There's us, we are traveling the wagon. There is the wagon driver, and there are the horses. You and I, said the Rebbe Rashab, we know that we're traveling to go to this resort in order to strengthen our health, in order we should serve Hashem with greater vitality and greater excitement. So the journey of this, the purpose of this journey in our mind is so that this should add to our service of Hashem. That's how we look at the journey. The wagon driver, he doesn't know why we are traveling. By him, the wagon driver, the purpose of the journey is that he should earn a few more rubles or a few more kopecks so that he could bring some more parnasa for his family. And there's also a third opinion. And the third opinion is the opinion of the horses, that their desire is to get to the straw. As was once customary, that when you wanted the horses to go quickly, you would hang a bag of straw on a stick so that to which the horses were saddled in front of the horse, a little bit distant from the horse, so the horse would try to get the straw in front of it, and they would hurry up to get closer towards the goal of where everyone else wanted to travel to. The horse is trying to get to the horse, to get to the straw, the hay. So Rebbe Rashab said and concluded, because the horses don't know about the angels, do the angels not exist? That was his response to the question of this intellectual about prophecy, about angels. This is also a lesson for all matters of Torah mitzvahs, which are connected to spirituality, which are connected to godliness, that even if it's not known to your own horse, to your animal soul says, I don't get this stuff. It doesn't affect the reality of it the way it needs to affect the animal soul. And so too regarding the days of Purim, that the power and the light and the vitality will be important after Mashiach will come. Again, that when Mashiach will come, the regular weekdays will be elevated. And the other holidays won't have this, but this is a reality. The reality is that even though we don't necessarily know how this is true and what this means, but this is a reality that Purim will be considered significant even after Mashiach comes. Everything that we find in the revealed part of Torah is, you see, you get greater depth in it by learning the inner dimension of Torah. Let's go to Eis Dalet on page 182. Every concept in Nigla gets as an enhanced depth through it being explained by the inner dimension of Torah. And this concept is explained with greater light in the teachings of Chassidus. This concept that the days of Purim will never be forgotten from your children. The days of Purim are eternal. That despite what's happening in the world, there is no change to Purim. Purim is always going to be a yantif, and it always has this impact. That the Esef Emek Beit Pir Shazal, Riza Teres HaKabbalah, Shakasha Yom in Liskarim, Adez Shehud Masker Esem Matech Harek Shalek Fish Ter Mitzapim Kavan Dershen Menu, Azayim Nasim, Han Shekolam Shachas Hashpoy Shahoy Mei Purim Mirpam Rishina Chayzum Nasim Kol Chon Shon Vashon. The Arizal adds depth to these words. Arizal says, when these days are remembered, that's when they happen. When a Jew remembers these things with feeling, the way the Torah demands and hopes and asks from him, then they happen. That means all the divine flow and all the hamshachas that happened then, at the first Purim, by a Jew remembering Purim with his heart and with the way the Torah wants him to remember Purim. It doesn't mention it here. Oh, yeah, it does mention here. As we'll see in the second teaching of the Baal Shem Tov about this. So this causes the revelation. It's not that there's two different things. These are remembered and they also happen again. How do they happen again? They happen again by our remembrance. Of course, they happen again even without our remembrance. But to have the full revelation of Purim is by a Jew participating and with his whole heart, the way the Torah wants him to, in the celebration of Purim, by remembering it and reliving it in a way that affects how that you're there. Move on. Purim So it's understood that the days of Purim in every generation are not just an imaginary thing. that we imagine and we try to relive something that happened the first time. The first time was the real Purim. And now we try to get something of that real Purim through our imagination. That's not what it means. Rather, all the good things that came down to the world on Purim the first time are repeated again and are revealed again every year on this Purim, and so too with every Yontif. Every Yontif, on that day, the divine flow is again released in the world. So it's not just we remember something that happened then, but there's a new divine revelation every year. The same one that came down the first time is again brought down to the world again now. So we don't have the King Achashverosh and the Haman, thank God, but there are divine revelation that caused the effect in Achashverosh and caused the miracle of Purim does descend, and it descends more in a visible, tangible way when we remember it the way the Torah wants us to with the whole heart. That's what that result says in Kabbalah. So that adds something to what this pasuk is saying. It adds some light to what the pasuk is saying. It's saying that it's not just we're trying to remember something that happened, but that our remembrance actually opens up the door to bring it here. Then the Baal Shem Tov adds something more to this. What does Baal Shem Tov say? I'm sure you all heard the teaching of Baal Shem Tov. You do a teres of Baal Shem Tov. The Rebbe says we should know this too. It's a known teaching of Baal Shem Tov. The Pirush HaMishnah, Akeres Megillah Megillah Mefreya Leyatza. Baal Shem Tov said, if someone reads the Megillah out of order, he does not fulfill his obligation. The simple meaning of the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov is, of the Mishnah that the Baal Shem Tov is quoting is, if you read the end of the Megillah before the beginning, if you come to shul and it's already started to read the Megillah and you missed the first pasuk, you can't go back and hear the first pasuk later. You have to hear it in order. But the word lemafreya also means from lemafreya means from behind. If you read the Megillah in a way that it's from behind, that it's something that happened a long time ago, you didn't do the mitzvah. If you read the Megillah in a way that it's just something that happened in the past, it's something that your grandparents celebrated, something that your parents celebrated, something that a few generations ago this was celebrated. Then you do not fulfill the obligation of Purim the way the Torah demands it. Certainly there's something that we're able to do because the Torah does not ask us to do something that we can't do. The Torah asks us to remember this like something that's happening to you this year. By remembering it that way, it causes all the divine flow to reach the world until it reaches this world in a way that's lower than 10 tefachim, meaning in a way that's not in the sky, but something that you can touch in the world. It should be in a way, by this remembrance, we should, even our horse, which means even our animal soul, should see the Jewish people have light and joy, gladness, and honor. By this remembrance, the way the Torah wants us to do this, this causes a revelation of Hashem in a visible way, so that we don't have to ignore the animal soul, but the animal soul can also recognize, wow, look what happened to Jewish people in Purim. Just a memory of one Purim in 1991. That's officially when the Gulf War was the first Gulf War was over. There was such a celebration, like you saw the promise of the Rebbe being fulfilled, and our Eretz Yisrael was saved. You saw it, and there was a celebration, and it happened, and it was on Purim. You mamish like you nefesh b'hamish, your animal soul saw, and I remember even General Schwarzkopf was speaking on the radio and saying the fact they didn't use chemical warfare was a miracle of God. So you saw the miracles of God on that Purim. That's what happens in the world by us remembering and living Purim. That brings it down. Okay. In the next section of this Farbrengen, the Rebbe speaks about how the Megillah continues and says the memory of Purim should not leave their children, and the parents have to plant in their children that they should fulfill Purim not just when they're kids till bar mitzvah, and not just until they need to earn a livelihood, they need to get a job, but this should be in a way that it doesn't stop. Lo Yosef, that they should have the eternality of Purim. So, and for all things the Jewish people had sacrificed for, on days of Purim, we have to give our children that connection to this in a way that it never leaves them. As the Gemara says, that although we accepted the Torah when God gave it to us at Mount Sinai, but it wasn't really a real acceptance because we were coerced to accept the Torah then. When was there a real acceptance of the Torah from ourselves? Only during the time of Purim. That's when there was Kimu v'Kiblu. That's when we fulfilled what we accepted at Mount Sinai for real, from our own. As the Alter Rebbe writes at length, that they had sacrifice for Purim for the entire year, and it never came into anyone's mind, any Jew throughout the year, says the Alter Rebbe, machshavas chutz chas v'sholom. Nobody thought. Not only did they show up and celebrate Sukkot that year and celebrate Shabbos every and put on tefillin, but they didn't even think about going against the Torah mitzvahs. They didn't even think about leaving. And the truth is that if they would have been saved. If they would have said, "I'm not Jewish anymore," it wasn't like in Nazi Germany that if it was written on your passport that you're Jewish, you're done. In the time of Haman and Purim, if you wanted to opt out, you could have been saved. But it never entered anyone's mind to not just to renegade and to go against and to leave Yiddishkeit, to leave Judaism completely, but to go against the Torah mitzvahs. No thought entered their mind that way. They never thought about that. Didn't enter their mind. So that's what we have to plant into our children, that, and when we do this, these days of Purim will be remembered in every generation. The Gemara says, on the verse that we just quoted, the Jewish people had light and joy, gladness and honor. The Gemara explains that the words that the Megillah uses, light, joy, gladness, and honor, refer to 4 mitzvahs. Light refers to the mitzvah of learning Torah. Joy refers to all holidays. Gladness refers to the mitzvah of Milah. And honor refers to tefillin, which tefillin includes within it all mitzvahs, as the Gemara connects all mitzvahs with tefillin. And then something else happened. Every pasuk has also a simple meaning. It wasn't just they had spiritual blessings, they were able to do the mitzvah of Milah and the mitzvah of tefillin freely without worrying about being killed because they were Jewish, but they actually had light and joy and gladness and honor in a simple sense. They had good begashmius, good beruchnius in the fullest, highest measure. So this all depends on how do we get all these blessings. We get all these blessings by our children receiving an appropriate education in a way that it stays with them even when they grow older. That's the way to get all these blessings. And that's also the way the decree of Haman was annulled. When Mordechai wanted to annul the decree of Haman, he tried all kinds of ways to annul the decree. Even after Esther spoke to Achashverosh, it still didn't help. Only when Mordechai gathered the children and he sat down to learn with them, that was what broke the decree. And it was so obvious that when Haman saw that Mordechai is learning Torah with the children, he said, "This will nullify my decree," even though he didn't yet know what he will tell Achashverosh the next day, when Achashverosh will tell him the next day. But just seeing that Mordechai is learning with the children, Haman knew, it's over. So, because even non-Jews know that when the Jewish people have Tinekei Shabesh Rabban, when they have their children studying Torah, that they're learning and they're being educated by Mordechai Yehudi, or by students of Mordechai who are going in the way of Mordechai. So then it says in the Torah that famously, when Yaakov went to get the blessing from Yitzchak, and he wore the clothing of Esav, so Yitzchak said, "Who are you?" Yitzchak was blind, but Yaakov went over to his father, and his father was able to feel the coat of Esav, the clothing of Esav, and his father remarked, "It's surprising because the voice is the voice of Yaakov, and the hands are the hands of Esav." So the Talmud says that when the voice of Yaakov is in the synagogue and in the schools and the people and children are learning Torah, the hands of Esav have no power. And there's no possibility for there to be any decrees against the Jewish people. Even decrees that were already signed. Not just they were signed in this world, but even if they're signed in heaven, like it was in Purim, that there was a decree not just signed by Achashverosh and Haman, there was a decree in heaven. But that all was stopped that the only time there was a decree was until we used the tool of the children studying Torah through Mordechai. When Mordechai and his students teach children Torah, that's what annuls the decree. And that's what happens, and that's what's remembered every generation. A Jew always needs God and needs God's blessings. He needs blessings for his children, for his health, and for to have a comfortable living, physical things. He needs a blessing from God for spiritual things. As whatever the psak din, whatever the ruling is in heaven, that things, even if the ruling in heaven is that things should be in an open and clear good has no limits. So even if there already is a decision in heaven, things should be good has no limits. And that's a human nature. As Gemara says, when you have $100, you want 200. So you always want more. As rich as you'll get physically and spiritually, you're always going to want more. That's how Hashem created us. And therefore, we always are needy to God's blessings. In other words, I was not saying this is a deficiency. I was saying Hashem built a person who always wants more, and therefore you always need God's blessings to get to the next place. And what's the way to get to the next place? How do you get the next level up, so to speak? It's by, the Megillah says, by your children, by their memory of Purim not leaving your children, which doesn't mean just Purim, but that means they make an effort that all Jewish children should go in the paths of Torah, the paths of Mordechai Yehudi, and not just for a short amount of time, till a certain age, but it should be in a way that it does not, that the memory of Purim never ceases from them, that they learn Torah in a way that it stays with them eternally. And then we are merited to have another, we merit to have the fulfillment of our heart's desires for good, with light and joy and gladness and honor, that you're happy because you receive all the good things you asked for. So it comes out that all of the efforts that you make to educate children, all Jewish children, the path of Mordechai, is paid back in a way that you get a lot more than you invested. That the parents get a lot more, both beruchnius and begashmi, spiritually and physically. I just want to end with one more point, and there's another blessing. Another blessing is like this. We see in many countries, especially in this country in America, that the influence of children on their parents, that in a pleasant way, in a peaceful way, children are able to impact their parents to do things that parents don't want to do themselves. They can't inspire themselves to do certain things. Their children are able to inspire them to do this. They do these things. And the parents thank their children for transforming their house to be a house full of Judaism and light and adding in God's blessings in the house. So this is one of the signs of the days of the Mashiach, which is Mashiach is about to come. As it says in the Tanakh, in the last verse of Tanakh, that before the day of Hashem, meaning the day of the coming of Mashiach, there'll be a situation where our children, the hearts of parents will be brought to Hashem through their children. As Rashi, it says that the Heishel Levavis, that the heart of the parents will be brought to God through their children. The children will speak in a way of love to their parents to go in the ways of God. As we see in our generation, this is happening, how children are having this influence on their parents. And this will help us understand why specifically in these generations, our Rebbeim devoted themselves especially to education of children from the youngest ages to older ages, because through this, we fulfill the pasuk of the last pasuk in Tanakh, before the day of Mashiach. What's going to happen? The children will inspire their parents. So that's why our Rebbes, the Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbeim, made an effort specifically in our generation to inspire children to study Torah, because this is the key, this is the step before the day of Yom HaGol Vanera, the day of the coming of Mashiach. The true Piku'ula through Mashiach Zechein L'matam Saratvach. Okay, any questions or comments? So this is why the Rebbe tells us to try to bring Jewish children to study Torah. One of the reasons, because this is what the call of the hour is before the coming of Mashiach, which is where we're up to. Great day, Rabbi Aryeh, great day, Rebbe, great day, Michal Mordechai, great day, David. Sei gesund.